Number 9. Corpses on a live stream. At 12:42 a.m. on January 30th, 2021, police headed to the residence of 29-year-old Raymond Weber, who had been seen live streaming the bodies of 2 naked injured women. Weber was reportedly at his aunt's apartment on Rocky Hill Road at the time, where his 17-year-old cousin Michaela McCaleb let him in. Later on, she noticed he had brought 2 women into the apartment. One of these girls was an Elk Grove native who was only 15 years old, with the other being 27-year-old Savannah Thaberge, and both seemed to have bruises all over their body. The sight of 2 injured and scared women sitting on the couch was a traumatic experience for the teen girl, but despite her best efforts, Weber refused to leave. McCaleb and the rest of her family decided to leave the apartment, having no idea what sinister intentions Weber had for the rest of the evening. Not long after, McCaleb reportedly saw Weber live streaming on Instagram, holding a gun and clearly showing the girls naked and unconscious on the floor. One of the girls even had a massive bullet hole in her body, prompting McCaleb to call the police. It took authorities several hours to gain entry into the residence, since Raymond had barricaded the doors and continued to fire shots at the police outside. After much negotiation and attempts to de-escalate the situation, police were forced to use flashbangs, chemical agents, and eventually a taser to subdue the culprit at 8:32 a.m. Weber allegedly tried to assault his victims prior to taking their lives. Given the heinous nature of his crimes, coupled with the lack of remorse he showed by flaunting it on social media, the most likely sentence is life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Number 8. The fentanyl murder. On January 12, 2023, 48-year-old Glennis Smith, a resident of Elk Grove, California, killed his estranged wife, 49-year-old Jennifer Smith Floyd, with a lethal dose of fentanyl. Though he had been married to her for 5 years, the couple had been living apart for months prior to the incident. This suggests a turbulent relationship between the two, and according to investigators, Glennis had already tried to poison his wife on 2 previous occasions. On the morning of the incident, Glennis made his 3rd and final attempt. Emergency services were unable to revive Jennifer, and she was pronounced dead on the spot. Even relatively small doses of fentanyl can cause catastrophic organ failure. Jennifer was undoubtedly still suffering the effects of the previous poisoning attempts, both of which also involved the use of fentanyl. While the evidence suggested that Glennis was the culprit, he was able to evade arrest until several months later. In July, a travel trailer owned by the couple was burned to the ground, nearly destroying the storage facility it was located in. Authorities allege that this may have been a ploy to receive an insurance payment, although the evidence pointed to Glennis himself starting the fire. On the 26th of July, police officers obtained a warrant for his arrest, and he was transported to Sacramento County Main Jail. Apart from facing murder charges for poisoning his wife, he is also on the hook for arson and insurance fraud. Number 7. The homeless man with the machete. At 6:30 p.m. on November 28, 2022, 42-year-old James Hall, a homeless man from Sacramento, bludgeoned 60-year-old Timothy Fairall halfway to death with a machete. After being struck with the weapon, the victim attempted to escape, making it as far as a block before falling to the ground. The Sacramento Metro Fire Department initially received reports that a cyclist had been struck by a vehicle. However, when they arrived at the scene, they saw Timothy had been brutally assaulted by a sharp weapon. The haphazard nature of the attack left the victim with a gaping wound that nearly crushed his skull, but the perpetrator ran away before finishing the job. Though his body still showed signs of life, his injuries were so severe that first responders had no choice but to declare him brain dead. He was ultimately taken off life support on Friday that same week. James left multiple pieces of evidence during his attempted escape, even leaving behind a pool of blood at a nearby elementary school. The fact that the attack occurred after school hours fortunately meant that no children were put in danger, but the perpetrator's escape path came dangerously close to putting them in harm's way. After canvassing the area, police eventually located the culprit near Shasta Community Park. There is no known motive for the crime, making it appear like a random act of senseless violence. James was transported to Sacramento County Main Jail, where he is being held without bond. He initially faced attempted murder charges, but now that his victim is dead, there is a chance he might be on trial for murder and potentially spend decades behind bars. What would you do if you woke up to an intruder in your home in the middle of the night? Tell us in the comments down below, and don't forget to subscribe. Number 6. Naive Home Invader. On May 12, 2020, 28-year-old James Nunley decided to break into a family's home while they were putting their child to bed. According to reports, Nunley had been homeless for quite some time, and he hid himself in the residence while he waited for the rest of the family to settle down for the night. Oddly enough, he did not take the opportunity to rob the place, but instead headed to their bathroom for a shower. As the family lay sleeping peacefully, Nunley made himself at home, taking his time to bathe carefully before exiting the bathroom. However, he was not counting on a member of the family staying awake for longer than usual. As soon as they spotted the home invader, they tried to apprehend him, prompting the perpetrator to make his escape. Had a family member not been awake at the time, an innocent child may have been left alone with a potentially dangerous man. If nothing else, the family would have woken to a house stripped clean of their possessions. Shortly after escaping, Nunley was apprehended by authorities, who discovered he was on probation. He was detained at the South Placer County Jail under burglary charges and was denied bail, while he awaits sentencing. Number 5. Family Slaughter. On June 21, 2023, 53-year-old Ruth Weiser and her 25-year-old son Joseph Thomason shot a man to death in their home in Fair Oak, Sacramento. Though the victim's identity has not yet been released to the public, authorities stated that he was living in the same house at the time. After shooting the man dead, Ruth and Joseph reportedly headed to the hospital to get treatment for mysterious wounds. Oddly enough, this was when they reported that someone had died at their house. This bizarre behavior indicates that neither the mother nor the son were in their senses at the time. When police officials went to the scene of the crime to investigate, they found the victim lying lifeless on the floor with a bullet wound. They also found evidence of multiple shots being fired, indicating that an argument had broken out, which led to haphazard gunfire, with most of the wayward bullets missing their target. The sudden outbreak of violence rocked the normally peaceful neighborhood, with one resident claiming she had lived there for over 23 years in complete safety. Ruth was arrested under homicide charges, whereas her son was detained as an accessory to murder. Given the seemingly unplanned nature of the crime, she might get a reprieve from a life sentence, though her son's life has undoubtedly been ruined, since he will be well into his 30s by the time he is released. Number 4. Girl by the River. On February 1st, 2022, the mangled corpse of 22-year-old Emma Roque was found near the American River in California after she had been missing for 2 days. She was reportedly on the autism spectrum, and the last time her family saw her was when she went out for an afternoon stroll on the 27th of January. 6 hours later, her family realized something was wrong, and they immediately alerted the authorities that she might have been kidnapped. It took police officials 48 hours to begin the search, during which time Roque was accosted by 37-year-old Mikilo Morgan Rawls, a homeless man who had frequently been seen around the area. After abducting and assaulting her multiple times, he killed her so violently that authorities were unable to release any details to the public. Her body was eventually found in a tranquil rural area next to the American River, the serene surroundings marred by the gory corpse Rawls had left behind. Detectives working on the case reportedly had a hard time looking at her body, which had been brutalized by a man many times her size. Rather than feeling any remorse for his vicious act, Rawls went so far as to steal the victim's phone and attempt to sell it later on. He was arrested on February 11th and taken to Sacramento County Main Jail, where he was held without bond. A long list of violent, brutal charges against him practically guarantee that he will never see the light of day again. Number 3. A deadly gang war. At 2 a.m. on April 3rd, 2022, 27-year-old Mtula Payton, 27-year-old Smiley Martin, and his 26-year-old brother Dandre Martin sparked a mass shooting that left 6 people dead and 12 injured. The shooting was prompted by a conflict between two notorious gangs, the Crips and the Bloods, who have been one of the biggest sources of violence in the Sacramento area for the past decade. The sudden outbreak of violence shocked the community, especially after millions of dollars were poured into anti-gang related projects in 2017. The victims included 21-year-old Jontea Alexander, 21-year-old Yumile Martinez Andrade, 29-year-old Devazia Turner, 32-year-old Joshua Hoy Lucchesi, 28-year-old Sergio Harris, and 57-year-old Melinda Davis. As the bars of downtown Sacramento closed, revelers emerged to face a hail of gunfire, and the onslaught left them scrambling for cover. Unfortunately, the bullets struck at least 18 people, and while 12 were able to survive their injuries, the 6 victims were left on the ground with their bodies shredded by high-caliber bullets. Reports indicate that the violence had already started escalating in the minutes prior to the shooting. Later on, 31-year-old Davion Dawson was also arrested in connection to the massacre, as he was seen carrying a gun shortly after the incident occurred. On May 3rd, Peyton and the Martin brothers were arrested for 3 of the 6 murders. Each perpetrator has a history of violence, and it is highly likely that they will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Number 2. Evil Man. In a horrifying incident that sent shockwaves through Northern California in August 2021, 51-year-old Troy Davis was apprehended for a heinous crime. Police allege that Davis forcibly entered a woman's home on the 2200 block of 11th Avenue, where he sexually assaulted her, murdered her, and tragically killed her 2 dogs before setting the house ablaze. The victim, identified as 61-year-old Mary Tibbetts, affectionately known as Kate, met a gruesome fate, leaving the community in deep mourning. Sacramento police arrested Davis on September 4th for unrelated parole violations, although they do not suspect a prior connection between him and the victim. Davis faces charges of murder, sexual assault during a burglary, arson, burglary, and malicious harm to animals. He was captured thanks to a Ring camera, which had recorded his disturbing behavior on a nearby porch earlier that week. The incident has sparked renewed debates about California's zero bail policy, with local lawmakers advocating for changes to prevent such tragic events. Davis, who appeared in court, is eligible for the death penalty. Number 1. The infant trapped in an inferno. At approximately 3:30 a.m. on June 22, 2022, an unnamed man held his 1-year-old child at knife point as he set his apartment on fire. The incident was reportedly sparked by a domestic altercation, where the man had an argument with his ex-girlfriend, the child's mother. The woman had arrived at the man's residence for a casual visit, but things quickly spiraled out of control, and the perpetrator decided to take his infant son hostage. When his ex-girlfriend asked to have the child back so she could leave, the perpetrator completely lost control and locked himself in the bathroom, threatening to take his own son's life if she did not leave. Luckily, an older child was also present in the apartment at the time, and he was able to call 911, who arrived at the scene shortly after. When the perpetrator saw the authorities approaching, he decided to take things to the extreme, setting his apartment ablaze and waiting for it to come crashing down. Firefighters were able to bring the inferno under control, saving the infant, older child, the mother, as well as the perpetrator in the process. According to reports, the mother had filed a restraining order against the perpetrator due to his history of violence and abuse. However, he was owed visitation rights, which is why she was forced to meet him at the time. The quick thinking of the older child in the room did not just save an infant's life, but also prevented the violent man from setting a fire that could have spread throughout the block. The perpetrator of this heinous act survived the incident, but authorities say that he will still be penalized heavily once he recovers. Reckless endangerment, attempted kidnapping, and arson are just some of the charges he will be facing. Which of these crazy Sacramento incidents shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Bad Badger.